Have you ever had someone so entitled, so loud, and so unreasonable that you wondered if they had completely lost their mind? Well, let me tell you the story of the day my neighbor, the infamous HOA Karen, decided to yell at me in front of my own house without even knowing who was inside. Because what she didn't realize was that I had a guest staying with me that week, and that guest was not just anyone. He was a federal agent, and the moment he stepped out, her jaw nearly hit the ground. But let's not jump too fast. To understand how this unbelievable moment happened, you have to know how it all started. It began on a warm Saturday morning. I was out front watering my lawn, minding my own business, when I noticed Karen walking down the street. Now, if you've never had to deal with an HOA Karen before, consider yourself lucky. She's the type of person who believes she owns the entire neighborhood. She has a rule book memorized like it's her Bible, and she loves nothing more than enforcing those rules on everyone else, except herself, of course. She has yelled at kids for riding bikes. She's called the police on people for parking slightly crooked, and she even once complained that someone's flowers were the wrong shade of pink. Yes, that's the level of ridiculous we're talking about. So here she came, stomping down the sidewalk like a soldier marching into battle. The second she spotted me, I knew I was in for it. She had that look on her face, the one where her lips are pursed so tightly you'd think she'd just bitten into a lemon. She pointed at me, raised her voice, and yelled, "You! Yes, you! Do you even know what time it is? You're breaking the HOA rules again." Now, I had no idea what she was talking about. It was 9 a.m, and all I was doing was watering my grass. But Karen doesn't need a reason. Karen invents reasons. So I calmly asked her what rule I was supposedly breaking. Big mistake. That question was like pouring gasoline on a fire. She started waving her hands, her voice going higher and louder. "Don't play dumb with me. You know watering is not allowed on Saturdays. You think you're better than everyone else? You think the rules don't apply to you?" At this point, I couldn't help but laugh a little, which only made her angrier. The truth was, I had checked the HOA guidelines myself, and watering was perfectly fine on Saturdays. She either didn't know the rules she claimed to enforce, or she was making them up just to start drama. But instead of backing down, Karen doubled down. She marched right up to my driveway, her finger jabbing in the air like a sword, and shouted, "I will have you fined for this. Don't test me. I know people on the board." And that was when the front door behind me opened. Now, here's the part Karen had no idea about. For the past week, my cousin had been staying at my place. He wasn't just any cousin. He was an FBI agent in town for a special assignment. He'd asked if he could crash at my house while he wrapped up some local work. And of course I said yes. He's the kind of guy who's calm, quiet, and never flashy. You would know by looking at him that he carries one of the most powerful badges in the country. So when the door swung open and he stepped outside, Karen froze mid-sentence. He wasn't wearing his full suit, but he had that unmistakable presence. His posture, his calm but firm look, and yes, the badge on his belt that glinted in the sunlight. It was all there. Karen's face went from red with anger to pale with shock in about 2 seconds. But let's rewind a little, because you need to understand the level of chaos Karen had been causing in the neighborhood before this moment. See, this wasn't the first time she tried to mess with me. A couple months earlier, she had written me 3 separate warning letters for things that weren't even violations. She accused me of having illegal paint colors on my shutters. She complained that my recycling bin was too close to the street. She even once rang my doorbell at 10 p.m. just to tell me my porch light was too bright. At first, I ignored her. Then I started pushing back, because enough was enough. I went to HOA meetings, I called her out in front of the board, and I made it clear that I knew the rules better than she did. And trust me, that drove her insane. She hated being challenged. She hated that someone wasn't afraid of her. Which brings us back to the Saturday morning, where she thought she could intimidate me one more time. The second my cousin stepped out, everything shifted. He didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, his calm eyes locked on Karen, his presence heavier than a ton of bricks. Karen's voice stuttered for the first time I'd ever heard. She tried to keep yelling, but it came out as a squeak. "W, who are you?" she stammered. That's when my cousin slowly reached into his pocket, pulled out his badge, and said, "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice." The silence that followed was priceless. You could almost hear the gears in Karen's head grinding, trying to figure out what just happened. Here she was, storming around like she was the queen of the block, and suddenly she was facing an FBI agent, not just a police officer, not a security guard, an actual federal agent. She tried to backtrack. Of course. "Oh, well, I was just making sure the rules were being followed," she muttered, her voice shaky. She crossed her arms and tried to look tough again, but it wasn't working. My cousin didn't raise his voice, didn't get angry. He simply said, "Harassment is not part of any HOA's rules. You might want to think twice before bothering people at their homes." Karen blinked, and for once in her life, she didn't have a comeback. She turned on her heel, muttered something under her breath, and marched back down the sidewalk, her face burning red. And just like that, the entire neighborhood finally saw her defeated. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, because Karen is not the type to give up so easily. She might have walked away in that moment, but deep down, I knew she was plotting her next move. She wasn't used to being embarrassed. She wasn't used to being shut down. And you can bet she wasn't going to let the fact that an FBI agent had called her out stop her from trying something else. And that's exactly what happened. You see, later that evening, I started getting texts from some of my neighbors. They told me Karen was going door to door, spreading rumors. She was telling people I had suspicious friends staying at my house. She hinted that I was hiding something and that she was going to investigate. Yes, she actually said that like she was a neighborhood detective. The irony, of course, was that the person she was suspicious of was literally an FBI agent. That's when I realized the situation wasn't just funny, it was dangerous. Because Karen's lies had a way of spreading, and if I didn't handle it properly, she could drag my name through the mud. She could make people fear me. She could even push the HOA to take action against me. But what she didn't know was that she had just messed with the wrong family. And that's where things really start to heat up in this story. So, do you want to know how an HOA Karen's petty games turned into one of the biggest mistakes of her life? Do you want to hear what happened when she kept poking around, not realizing she was getting deeper into trouble than she could handle? Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. When Karen walked away that morning, red-faced and humiliated, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. After all, most people, when faced with an FBI badge, would take the hint and back off. But not Karen. Oh no, Karen wasn't built that way. If anything, her embarrassment only made her more determined. She didn't want to admit she'd been wrong. She didn't want to admit she'd been put in her place. Instead, she doubled down, and that's when the real storm started. By that evening, the whispers began. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors. "Hey, did you hear Karen's telling people you have some kind of secret guest? She said your cousin looks suspicious. She's going around saying you might be doing something illegal." I almost laughed when I read those messages. Karen, who couldn't even keep her own yard clean, was now pretending to be some kind of neighborhood investigator. But the more I thought about it, the less funny it became. Because rumors have power. Once they spread, they take on a life of their own. And in an HOA-controlled neighborhood, lies could turn into fines, hearings, and endless headaches. My cousin, the FBI agent, was calm as ever. He listened as I explained what was happening, and then he smiled slightly. "She has no idea what she's playing with," he said. "But let's give her a little rope and see how far she goes." And that's exactly what we did. The next day, Karen tried to act casual, but she couldn't resist throwing little comments my way. As I took out the trash, she shouted across the street, "Funny how many visitors you've had lately. Must be a lot going on in that house." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. I ignored her, but my cousin simply raised an eyebrow and waved at her, his badge still clipped to his belt. The way she froze, even for a split second, was priceless. But ignoring Karen wasn't enough because she wasn't stopping. Within a week, she had convinced 2 members of the HOA board to look into my household. She claimed she was only being a concerned citizen. Concerned citizen? Please, this was nothing more than a power trip. She wanted control not just how people parked or watered their lawns, but who they allowed inside their homes. That's when my cousin decided it was time to step in. He sat me down and explained, when people spread lies, sometimes the best way to stop them isn't to shout louder. It's to shine a light on the truth. So we made a plan. The next HOA meeting was coming up, and everyone in the neighborhood would be there. Karen loved these meetings. She thrived on them. It was her stage, her chance to boss people around, her time to shine. And she had no idea that this meeting would be the one that turned her world upside down. The night of the meeting, the room was buzzing. People filled the chairs, flipping through papers, chatting quietly. I sat near the back with my cousin beside me. Calm as ever, Karen, of course, sat front and center, her clipboard in hand, looking like she was about to deliver the State of the Union. When the board opened the floor for community concerns, Karen's hand shot up like a rocket. She stood tall, cleared her throat dramatically, and launched into her speech. I'm deeply worried about what's happening in our neighborhood, she began, her voice loud and sharp. We have people bringing in suspicious guests. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they're doing. And I, for one, don't feel safe until we get some answers. All eyes turned toward me. Some neighbors looked confused. Others looked uncomfortable. Karen smirked, thinking she had me cornered. She had planted her seeds of doubt, and now she was ready to watch them grow. But before I could even open my mouth, my cousin stood up. The room went silent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a dramatic gesture. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out his badge, and held it up for everyone to see. My name is Agent Daniels, he said, clearly. I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've been staying with my cousin while working on an assignment in this area. And I want to make something very clear. The only suspicious behavior I've seen here is the constant harassment coming from certain individuals. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen's jaw fell open. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak squeak. But... Agent Daniels continued, his tone firm but calm. This community deserves peace. It deserves respect. It does not deserve someone spreading lies, intimidating residents, and pretending to be in charge of things that aren't her responsibility. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room. Let me be absolutely clear. Harassment and false accusations can cross into criminal territory, and I would strongly advise anyone engaging in that behavior to stop immediately. The room erupted in murmurs. People were whispering to each other, nodding, even clapping quietly. For the first time, the neighbors saw Karen for what she really was, a bully, and they saw that the bully had finally been confronted. Karen, on the other hand, looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Her face turned crimson, and she sank into her chair, her clipboard slipping from her hands. She didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. Afterward, neighbors came up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me for standing up to her. They were relieved that someone had finally put Karen in her place. And the best part? The HOA board announced that they would be reviewing her behavior, since multiple residents had come forward with complaints of their own. But Karen wasn't just embarrassed. She was done. Over the next few weeks, she became quieter, less visible. No more door-to-door rumors. No more yelling from across the street. It was like she'd been deflated, all her power gone. And eventually, she stopped coming to meetings altogether. The HOA was finally free from her grip. For me and my cousin, it was more than just a victory. It was proof that sometimes the best way to handle a bully is not by fighting them with their own tactics, but by exposing them to the truth they can't argue with. Karen could shout at me all she wanted, but she couldn't shout down the FBI. And as for the neighborhood, it changed. People started relaxing again. Kids rode their bikes without fear of being yelled at. Families planted whatever flowers they wanted without worrying about wrong shades of pink. The air felt lighter. It felt like a community again. As for Karen, the last I heard, she put her house up for sale. Maybe she thought she'd have better luck in another neighborhood. Or maybe she just couldn't handle the fact that she'd lost her throne. Either way, one thing was certain. She wouldn't be missed. And every time I see my cousin now, we laugh about that day. The day Karen thought she could bully me in front of my own house. not realizing she was about to go head-to-head with the FBI. So if you've ever dealt with Karen, remember this. Their power only lasts as long as people let them have it. The moment you stand up, the moment you shine a light on the truth, their control crumbles. Backhand index pointing right if you enjoyed the story. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable real-life stories, and drop a comment below about your own Karen encounters. Let's build a community where people stand up for themselves, no matter how loud the bully yells. Because in the end, bullies can't stand against the truth.